Okay, although there's been some signs of a recovery, of course, Minnesota has experienced 76,000 foreclosures since 2006. What can state government do to address housing concerns specifically?
Tom Emmer.
You can start, is this working? You can start getting the economy moving again. It kind of goes back to what my colleague Paul Thiessen just said when he refers to the Growth and Justice report, progressive think tank. I've still been looking up what that means. If you have a higher education degree, you are going to draw a higher salary. Here's the reality. We don't have the jobs to support paying mortgages and putting food on the table and putting clothes on the kids. We have an upside-down system right now where government apparently feels it's the only entity that's allowed to grow. In this state, since the early 1960s, we've got a state government that's grown on average every 2 years of almost 20%. And here's what we have right now. We've got the city of Minneapolis laying off police officers and the city council giving itself a raise. It's misplaced priorities. Let's reduce the size of government, redesign it. Let's reduce the cost of doing business in this state so we keep our jobs and start attracting new jobs.
Margaret Anderson Kelliher.
Well, the issue of home foreclosure is a very serious one to a lot of Minnesota families, and we have been trying very hard to respond to that. We actually last year passed a moratorium on foreclosures on homes in this state. The governor vetoed it. I think it was a deaf ear response to what is going on in families' lives right now. We need to be able to make sure that families can afford those mortgages, but we also need to make sure we're working on the property tax problem, because that is another big part of why families are sliding into foreclosure. It is both a jobs problem and a property tax problem. I will have an economic development plan for every corner of this state that grows off of our strengths, that gets us back moving again and gets jobs growing. I will also make sure that people are protected when they are vulnerable to bigger interests, the bank interests, those folks who are preying on them.
Rob Hahn.
Jobs and tax reform. We need to create more jobs, to keep the jobs we have here, but even more so, the government in this state needs to work with businesses of all sizes to find ways to create new jobs, to give them incentives to hire new employees. I've talked to business leaders in the state, and that's their #1 concern. Why are we so overtaxed, and what can the government do to give us some incentive to hire new people? People don't want to lose their homes to foreclosure, but sometimes if you don't have a job, usually if you don't have a job, you're not going to have money to pay that mortgage. So getting people jobs is goal #1. In terms of tax reform, we need to look at restructuring some of the tax system, which might lead to an increase in the uber rich, but also, if it's going to do that, on the personal tax and income tax side, we need to look at reducing the capital gains tax throughout the state to encourage more investment in companies, particularly those here in the state.
R.T. Rybak.
Well, I've been on the front lines of fighting foreclosure, and I recognize there are times government has to step in, but the solutions are jobs, and they are also health care reform, because the statistics tell us that health care costs are clearly what drives more foreclosures. The other point, however, happens to be property taxes, and I was astonished to hear Tom Emmer talk first about the first point that's right, that state spending has gone up, and somehow blame it on local government. During the time I've been in office, Tom, state spending has gone up 12%, city spending has gone up 1%. We've paid off debt, which has put police officers on the street. You've cut local government aid, which has taken police officers off the streets of Minneapolis and cities across this state. Look, you and I both raise taxes. It's just that the Democrats here are telling the truth. It's time for honesty with what's going on in this state. The state budget is in chaos. Local governments are making it work around the state. We need a partner who can make that work, to put police on the streets, to make our schools better, and yes, to stop foreclosures.
Bill Haas.
November 2009, another 700 jobs left the state of Minnesota. 400 of those jobs were in the city right next door to my city in Brooklyn Park. Why did those companies leave? Why are major corporations in the state of Minnesota not locating their businesses in Minnesota and expanding in other places? It's taxes cost of doing business, and regulations. I hear it time and time again. I'm a business owner. I work with small business owners around this state every single day, and I hear what they have to say. And they're one step away from leaving the state. If we're going to stop foreclosures, look at the 90s. When businesses had money and they could invest it in their business, they were growing. People had income because they were working because they had good jobs. We can do that again by restructuring our tax system, getting a holding of our spending, and people will have the money to spend, and we can get this economy going, and we won't have this problem anymore. But right now, we got a definite problem, and it's got to be stopped.